So we're either in an economic recession right now, or it looks like we very much will be in the near future. And I'm no economist, but I am a digital advertising expert, and I want to talk about what's likely to happen to Facebook and Instagram advertising and the businesses that rely on those ad platforms to generate customers, to reactivate new customers, and all that sort of stuff. Because digital advertising has been around long enough now where it's been through previous economic difficulties, and we can see what happens. There's a pattern to the things that are likely to take place, and of course you can go further and study other forms of advertising and see that the trends very, very much continue. And I think this is a really important discussion to have for businesses, many of which were watching this and be in my audience, that use Facebook and Instagram ads a lot, and their businesses reliant to some extent on those ad platforms. So there's sort of two sides to this. There's the what are the users, the Facebook and Instagram users, going to do? How is their behavior going to change? And then there's also what are advertisers going to do? How are their behaviors going to change? Because changing behaviors of both categories, both camps there, is going to impact your results and what you see on the platform. So let's start with the users first. How impacted are your campaigns going to be by an economic downturn? Are you going to see fewer sales? Are you going to see lower return on ad spend numbers? I think it massively depends on what you sell. How much of a luxury or potentially an unnecessary item is your product? You could apply the same thing to services. Or is it something that people are going to buy no matter what because it's really important to them or really important to the running of their business or something like that? Those that are on the more sort of luxury, not seen as necessary end of the spectrum are probably going to be hit harder. It's natural reaction. There's going to be lots of information about this on the news. People are going to be hearing about economic issues. They're going to think, where can I save? Where can I cut back? Does your product or service fall into that category? Is that something where people could go, you know what, let's not buy that, or let's cancel that, or let's not use that service for 6 months, just see where the lay of the land is going to be. If people get made redundant or lose their jobs and things like that, is what you offer, what you're advertising on the platform, something that could be cut fairly early, in which case this is likely to hurt you more from a user standpoint if you're selling things that are staples, as I said, of businesses that people are going to buy anyway, that they need. Perhaps one of the big selling points of your product or service is its cost, that you're less competitive, you're less expensive than your competitors, for example. Well, then you're going to be affected much less by any economic issue. So you really have to factor that in when thinking about what a user's going to do. It is likely that across the board, if we were to average it out, there is going to be less purchases. Your sort of click to conversion ratio is going to go down if people don't feel like they've got as much disposable income. And if there are layoffs and things like that, that's likely to happen. So that's the first thing to be aware of from the user standpoint. Even if someone isn't directly economically impacted, like they've still got their job, they still have the same level of income, if they're hearing about it on their news and someone brings up rumors of companies potentially laying people off, people do change their behaviors just because of that. So something to certainly be aware of. Obviously it's not going to last forever, but just keep that in mind and think about that in relation to what you sell. Then we have to look at the business side of things. What are other advertisers going to do in response to a recession? Now, partly because user activity will change, potential customer activity will change, they will scale back their budgets, but also just because that's what people do. Again, business owners, marketing departments are going to hear about this stuff and they're going to be worried and they're going to think, how's it going to affect us? And if you're a business looking to cut costs, one of the easiest places, one of the first places to do it is your advertising budgets. That's one of the first things to go. It's far easier to do that than laying off a whole load of staff. If you want to cut advertising budgets and just wait out a 6, 12, 18 month period and bring them back up, you can quite quickly and easily do it. So it's one of the first places for businesses to go. Often as well, particularly larger businesses, if they do cut their advertising budgets, they might not see the impact of it immediately, particularly if they're doing more sort of branding advertising. As a small business owner, you might see a huge impact if you cut your advertising budget in half tomorrow, for example. That might directly lead to a massive result and an immediate loss of new customers coming in. You might see a proportional loss in customers, for example. Whereas larger businesses, that tends to not be the case, at least not initially. It can be a big deal for them over the long run, but not initially. So budgets are going to be scaled back. Now, of course, because Facebook and Instagram advertising operates within an auction system, so the price is set by demand and supply, when the demand for advertising space which is people's budget, when that gets brought down, the cost of advertising on the platform should come down. So it's very likely that we will see a reduction in the cost of Facebook advertising across the board. Again, you're going to see it probably more in certain locations that are hit harder economically than others and all that sort of stuff, but across the board, we're likely to see a reduction in the term we usually use to refer to how expensive Facebook and Instagram advertising is CPMs. Cost per 1,000 impressions is like a good general metric to work out how expensive it is to advertise, because of course things like cost per conversion, cost per click, etc., those are so determined by the quality of your campaign and the offer and what it is you're selling and all that. But whereas CPMs, cost per 1,000 impressions, is a good benchmark for how expensive it is in general, and we're likely to see a reduction in CPMs. And we've seen this before. We all know what happened sort of the first half of 2020. Lots of businesses were forced, local businesses, anything in person was forced to close. A lot of other businesses scaled back their budgets, understandably so, or even stopped advertising altogether because there was so much uncertainty around the future and what are people still going to buy our stuff and all that sort of thing. And that did lead to significant reductions in the cost of advertising on Facebook and Instagram. I'm going to talk about the sort of subsequent effect of that in a minute, but we have seen CPMs decrease. So definitely something to be aware of, that across the board, the cost of Facebook and Instagram advertising, it is almost certainly going to get cheaper, more in certain locations, as I said, but that is something to watch out for. Now, in terms of when that happens, I think this is a really important point. It might not be felt immediately. So whilst companies might scale budgets back, some will stop advertising altogether, some will probably go bust and therefore obviously won't be advertising. That reduces the demand for ad real estate, reduces the price. A lot of companies, if it's a particularly bad economic recession, will be firing a lot of people, laying them off, making them redundant, etc. And what a lot of people do nowadays, and you see this all the time, I'm sure you know people that do this, if they get made redundant, the first 6 months of that redundancy, they might not try and look for another job. They might instead try and set up their own business. And this happens all the time now. And when people do set up their own business, they start with things that are easy to set up. There's a lot of drop shipping, for example, a lot of print on demand businesses set up, a lot of e-commerce businesses online, things like that. And where do they put, say, they've got a bit of savings they want to invest in their new little business, where does that go? Well, it's very likely to end up in Facebook and Instagram advertising. So for that first 3-6 months, there'd be a lot of people likely doing that, trying to find other ways to generate extra income, putting that money in. Now, I know, you know, that a lot of those people are not going to succeed. They don't have the skills, but if they spend a couple thousand in Facebook and Instagram ads, and there's enough people doing that, that might keep the price up high for a while. So let's say we start seeing it plastered all over the news that we're in a recession, and companies start cutting their budgets really quickly. Don't expect the price to come down immediately. That might be a sort of 6-month delay, in part, larger companies take a while to work out budgets and things like that. So things take a little bit of time to come through. But also because if people are being made redundant, then a lot of those people will start new businesses. They'll try that for a while. They'll put money into the platform. That'll keep the cost up high. It's after that we're likely to see the cost come down. So just keep an eye on that there might be a bit of a delay factor because of the sort of dynamics that we're likely to see. Now, once CPMs do actually come down, which is almost certainly going to happen, we saw this, as I said, in the first half of 2020, certain advertisers will undoubtedly see their best results ever that are sort of completely unreplicable in other scenarios. Now, we saw this again. I speak to advertisers all the time that from, say, May 2020 or April 2020 to June or July, where people were stuck at home, couldn't go anywhere, spending lots of time on Facebook and Instagram, but also the cost of advertising was much cheaper because of the factors we talked about. Big businesses cut their budgets, a lot of businesses aren't advertising. They got just incredible results. CPMs came right down and they were getting ROAS numbers that they can't even get close to anymore. No matter how good the campaigns are, it's just not replicable. So some advertisers will certainly see that. Those that aren't as badly affected themselves, but the overall reduction in cost, there may be a time period where they see fantastic results. And that's something to be really aware of, because it may be that you want, if you do see that, if you can see that in your data, you want to scale and take advantage of what for you might be a fantastic time to advertise. It's not going to be a negative for everyone. If you're on the more positive side of things and you come out of this well, you might really want to take advantage of that. So don't always go into this and think about this from a really pessimistic mindset. It might be the best time for your business and customer acquisition efforts in particular if this indeed does happen, is as bad as most people think it's going to be. Okay, so what can you do to prepare now as a Facebook and Instagram advertiser? How should you get ready? Well, firstly, keep a very close eye on your numbers. It tends to be these things, the big changes on the ad platforms do follow the news cycle. So once we start seeing recession and all that sort of stuff plastered all over the news, which we've seen a little bit of, but not massively, I think it's going to be more significant, then we're likely to start to see these things happen. So keep a close eye on your numbers. If all of a sudden your click to purchase ratio, that's one of the things that's likely to decrease because people become a bit more savvy about things. They shop around more, try and compare prices of different things. So they might still be clicking through on your ads to your landing pages to check them out, but just might not purchase because they might check out other options and things like that. They do more research. If that decreases, your click to purchase ratio decreases, which is going to be felt in your cost per conversion will go up and your return on ad spend will go down, you may well need to scale back your budget. You might need to pause your campaigns for a while. So just keep a very close eye on that if it starts to happen, all of a sudden you need to be prepared. As a business owner, strongly recommend that you get some, rainy day funds set up. If you plan for worst case scenario, it may well never happen. And for a lot of businesses, it won't. But if you're just prepared, okay, well, we might only be able to acquire, half or 70% of the customers that we currently do. Are we prepared for that? Can we cope with that? Put some systems in place and get some things ready to make that viable. You may also want to look to change up how you advertise. So if you know that your target audience is now more concerned about the cost saving elements of the things that they buy, well, perhaps you can focus on that. So if there are a number of benefits associated with buying your product or service, and right now you mainly focus on the fact that it's got this extra feature or it's better than alternative options, something like that, which is absolutely fine. Perhaps you want to test using both in copy and in your creative more cost saving focus elements. So this is 30% cheaper than the alternatives. On average, when customers switch to us, they save X. Get your 40% discount off now. Maybe that can just come to the fore, and that should be something that you should test. If it's more important to your users, it's going to help you get better results if you make it a main focus of your ad copy and of your ad creative. Another thing advertisers should be thinking about, many of you will be business owners, entrepreneurs, etc., is that there might be some cheap talent available if there are redundancies and layoffs and things like that. Now, we saw this again in 2020, where all of a sudden there were lots of media buyers, lots of Facebook advertising experts, Instagram advertising experts, but also on the creative side of things, graphic designers, etc., that no longer had employment. They lost the contract if they're working for themselves. So there might be some cheaper talent available to help you get better results on the creative side of things, on the copywriting side of things, just running your ads for you. It's just worth keeping in mind that if that's going on, these people that might have been really expensive to hire or reach before might now be available. And if you're still going to be advertising, which I imagine the vast majority will, and you're still going to be spending good budgets, then that might be something that can really help you out. You go, okay, well, that quality graphic designer or video editor that was probably out of our budget range before, well, actually, because of market conditions, etc., they might be happy to work for us for what we can afford to pay now, and that sort of thing. So keep that in mind, that there might be some real high quality talent out there that's now cheaper than it was before, and you can grab that and use that, and that's certainly something that business owners can take advantage of and make a positive out of something that might be a bit negative. And I've already mentioned it, but if you do see lower CPMs and you are still seeing good return on ad spend numbers, good cost per conversion numbers, it's absolutely fine to scale and take advantage of that. Some advertisers will see their best ever results during tough economic times, not just because they're advertising something that really suits poor economic times, but also because a lot of the other advertisers are scared off, there's less competition, the price comes down, but there's still going to be people using Facebook, Instagram, etc. So certainly something to keep in mind and potentially take advantage of. Again, that's why it's so important that you really closely monitor your numbers. And in terms of getting prepared now, it's really important that you keep an eye on the long term when it comes to your Facebook and Instagram advertising, that you have campaigns in place and strategies that you're using that take care of the long term, that build a relationship between you and your prospects. That's going to make them less cost sensitive if they feel like they know, like, and trust you, and they care about your business and want to buy from you because you've put in the work. I show you my favorite long-term Facebook advertising strategy in this video here. Strongly recommend you go and check it out. It walks you through the entire process. It's actually quite an inexpensive way to advertise, and as I said, can help build a relationship between you and your prospects, which can make them less cost sensitive. Go ahead and check it out.